Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our local audience and all of you connected via our website and YouTube channel and wherever in the world you might be, even North Carolina. I'm Dale Weber, and on behalf of the Portland Symphonic Choir and as president of the choir, welcome to the first of our 3 Summer Sings events for this year. And in our promise to be good community members, this year's Summer Sings will all be virtual to protect everyone's good health from the pandemic. That's the end of our public health announcement. At this time, I want to remind all choir members who are joining via Zoom, please be sure to engage that mute button so all we hear during the presentation at approximately the same time as whatever wonderful things Ralph has to say. You can always show your appreciation with your microphone off by doing this. I'm told that's a universal sign language sign for applause. Also, many folks have found it helpful to use their headphones or earbuds for the best online experience. I also want to take a moment to thank our operations manager, Jade, wave Jade, as she leaves us at the end of this month to accept a full-time position at Lake Grove Presbyterian Church. This is where you can practice your... And now, since choir members will begin seeing emails from her, let's welcome our new operations manager, a premiere performance with Claire Robertson Price. Thanks. At this time, I'll pass now the virtual microphone to one of the choir's musical directors, Wendy Bamonte.
Thank you, Dale. Tonight, it is my great privilege to welcome Ralph Nelson as the leader of this session. Ralph is the founder and artistic director of Portland's Bach Cantata Choir, choir director at First Emmanuel Lutheran, and director of the Holiday Park Plaza Singers. Ralph is in demand as an artist in residence throughout the Portland area, reaching over 2,000 children each year. He has written hundreds of original songs plus 5 one-hour shows and works with 20 schools per year. And Ralph joined the Portland Symphonic Choir in 1981 and has served the choir in many different capacities, including executive director, board chairman, and now our tenor section leader. In 1982, Ralph met his future wife, Susan, a soprano in the Portland Symphonic Choir, while they were both singing on tour in Belgium. So Ralph, thank you for all the ways you have served Portland Symphonic Choir for over 40 years. Let's see some hands. And thank you for leading this session tonight. I am excited to dive in and sing your favorite Mass.
Thank you, Wendy. And in symphonic choir, one of the things that happens is we oftentimes encounter a work, we open up the page and it says Mass in something or other, C minor, C major, B minor. And what tonight's all about is kind of figuring out, what does that all mean? And giving some little bit of historical background and context to this. So I'll go ahead and share a screen for you. So my favorite Mass. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 5 sections from 5 different Masses. And so we're going to be singing a Kyrie from Gregorian Chant, Gloria from William Byrd's Mass for 4 voices. Credo, Credos are very, very long. And so we'll do sections of the B minor Mass of Bach, and you'll see how we'll work on this. And in particular, not only the opening Credo, but the Crucifixus and the Et Resurrexit. Now, truth in advertising, those of you who saw that we might be doing the Mozart C minor Mass, well, when Wendy and Jade and I looked at it on the screen, it looked terrible, in part because it's for double choir, and nobody could figure out amongst the 3 of us where our parts were. And we said, nope, let's can that and go for a different Mozart Mass. So we're going with the Coronation Mass instead. And then the Agnus Dei from a really neat work by Haydn, which you may or may not know, the Mass in Time of War, which, as you'll see, Beethoven obviously knew this work when he wrote the last movement of the Missa Solemnis. And then finally, if there's time, we'll go back and sing a work we did a couple of years ago, the Agnus Dei from the Midnight Mass of Charpentier. So the question is, we'll just spend a minute or two talking a little bit about what constitutes a Mass. The Mass is basically a Roman Catholic service. And what we know of when we look at something that says Mass in something or other, C minor, Great Mass, what have you, consists of 5 movements, and they are known as the ordinary of the Mass. And they're known as the ordinary because they always are in every Mass, no matter what liturgical time of the year it is, or what the priest might want to do, or what have you. These are always in the Mass. And those 5 parts are the Kyrie, which is Lord have mercy. And this comes really right at almost at the beginning of the service. And it immediately is followed by the Gloria, glory to God in the highest. And then there tended to be readings and a sermon. And then comes the Nicene Creed, the Credo, I believe in one God. And after that point, we go into the Eucharist, the communion time. And there are 2 parts that are always the same in that, and that's the Sanctus, the Holy, 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 which generally has a Benedictus. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest. In other words, the words spoken on Palm Sunday to Christ. And then finally, Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, always in a 3-part form, always ending the 3rd time with Dona nobis pacem, grant us peace. And that's what we call, when you see something that says a Mass, you're always going to have those 5 parts. So a quick history of how this all came about. Certainly the Mass dates back to the early church. Probably was Roman chant, but we don't have examples of that. What we do have is a great deal of Gregorian chant. And that starts about the year 800 and 900. And during Charlemagne's reign in the Carolingian time, but then spreading throughout all of Europe. And tonight we'll look at, in particular, we'll look at a chant, we'll look at the way the chant, how you read chant from the original notation. I'll teach you how to do that. It's not very tough once you know a few little tricks. Then about the 12th century, the chant began to be very elongated, and a drone was added often, and there was a harmony that started. And these works became extraordinarily complex. In college, I did my thesis on Guillaume Dufay, and you might have, 1 syllable going on for 3 minutes. So these works tended to go a long, long time. And eventually the church said, that's it. We have to simplify this, which actually gave birth to some of the greatest choral music ever written, which were, I think, in my opinion, the Renaissance masses. Palestrina, Josquin des Prés, Thomas Louis de Victoria, William Byrd, and many others. And then composers started to expand out a little bit. And in particular, they wrote large-scale masses, oftentimes for very special services. These weren't the normal service you'd come in at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock and have communion and a couple of things. These were like huge services. Monteverdi, Bach, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, they became concert works unto themselves. The whole idea that you would take a Mass, but that might be a huge concert work. And then in the 20th century, and I apologize for everybody who loves the 20th century Masses, my specialty is till the year 1800. So we're not going past 1800. You'll have to find somebody else. But I encourage you to look up Vaughan Williams and Poulenc, 2 amazing masterpieces with their setting of the Mass. Ely Whalen in Canada as well, which dovetails right into the Episcopalian Church, revives these traditions. People write Masses all the time. I've actually written one for First Emmanuel that we do on occasion during Epiphany. So it continues on. There are literally thousands and thousands of settings of the Mass. Well, I'm going to go ahead, and you came here to sing, and that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to share, if I get this right. Hello, Ralph. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sing a little Gregorian chant. And I have written out the chant. Hold on a sec, because I did that wrong. So I'm going to stop share again. And now let's see if I can do this correctly. Oh, just hit share. Okay. I've written out the chant. We're going to look at the actual chant writing in a minute, but feel free to sing. Chant is very free, so you just kind of have to kind of go with the flow. So here we go in the Kyrie movement. We'll start it back at the beginning. There we go. We sing it 3 times. So I forgot to tell you that you should think of yourself right now in a very nice all stone monastery, which would be very nice and cool today. And just kind of meditate along with the chant. Now, Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison, always in that order. Chant usually repeats each one 3 times. And you can see that the last time they kind of got very extended. And this was the problem they were having by the 15th and 14th and 15th century, is that like on one word, it might get this extended. And you can imagine how long the Mass may have gone. Well, what I'd like to do next is actually show you how the chant was originally written. And so we'll go to the next example. And by the way, we are listening to the monks of Salem, which is by far the great chant monks. And chant was written on 4 lines, okay, not 5 lines. And this thing's really important. It looks like a good old C clamp. And you know what? That's exactly what it means. It's a C. And that's where, in this case, middle C is. Now this little guy can move around. He can move on any line, and C can become any line. And you will see that throughout Baroque manuscripts. All of Bach's manuscripts are written in what are called the C clefs, where the lines, the clef is on a different line. You have to just figure out where everything is. So if you want to figure out what note we're on, here's C, and the space is B, A, G, F, E, D. Lo and behold, we're on a low C. Now, these little dots are called neumes. All the little different symbols have all sorts of different Latin names. That's not terribly important. It's just important to know what to do with them. So they're just a note. And then the next note, re. Now, this is not a chord. You might think it's a chord. It's not. You always read chant from the bottom up. Kyrie. And then these little guys basically just mean go faster. The dot means stay a little longer. How much longer? Nobody really knows. You just look at each other in the chant and you move on, or the person leading it. Then here, low, up to high. Di da dum di liaison. And this little guy means that the rest of the monks might come in. This might just be the priest, but it can be done in all sorts of different ways. The important one is this one, the IIJ. Not exactly sure what the Latin means on this, but basically it means you do it once, twice, 3 times. So you do this section 3 times. Then you go on to Christe, and you do that. But now this little guy at the end, he's one of my absolute favorites. You don't sing this. Why? This is something that's carried on in manuscripts until basically about the mid-1700s, that they always wrote out the note that you were going to go to on the next line right at the end of the line. See how that goes? There's that note, that's that note. Very useful for choral singers. I wish we had that in our regular scores, but a lot of us actually write in the note on our scores. So here's Christe, and it goes down to there, and you repeat it 1, 2, 3 times. Then we have Kyrie, di di dum ba di dum bi da da di, and etc. Repeat it twice, and you go on. And then we have one more little symbol that's interesting, and that's this guy. And basically, it's a mordent, is what we would know. Di da dum. So it's this note, then this note, and you're going to hold it a little bit longer because it's got a dot on it. Di dum bum, and down, etc. And this is actually a real flat, and that becomes B flat. Di da da dum, B, etc. So now that you've had your quick lesson in how to be a monk, and you're nice and cool in your very nice stone monastery, let's go ahead and sing it from the chant. And I'll point kind of where we are, so you get a handle of it. Here we go. Oh, moving back just a little bit.
Kyrie
So we move on next to the Renaissance. And by far one of the great Renaissance masses is William Byrd's Mass for Four Voices. And in the summertime in Portland, if you actually want to attend a service and hear the entire thing, Cantores in Ecclesias always does the Mass in Four Voices every year during a service. I don't know if they're doing it this year for the Byrd Festival, but when the Byrd Festival finally comes back, and it is absolutely phenomenal. The tradition with the Gloria is that the priest would sing what was called an incipit. And that's the first part, Gloria in excelsis Deo, or something similar to that. And then the choir would come in on Et in terra pax. And you'll see that happen in the next example. And let's just go ahead and sing it. You will notice when the example starts that the top line is soprano, the next line down is alto, and the alto is kind of low. The next line down is tenor and then bass. And sometimes the clefs go away in the example, the score that we have. So you just have to keep on exactly kind of where you are on that. But I think you'll see that it is very, very singable. So here we go. William Byrd, Mass for Four Voices, written in the 1500s.
Gloria in excelsis Deo, et in terra omnibus bone voluntate, laudamus te, glorificamus te,
Byrd so much is if you've ever had to take a counterpoint class in school, his Renaissance counterpoint is so incredibly beautiful, amazing, and how it all fits together to me is still just kind of miraculous. One of the great composers of the Renaissance. So I totally recommend, if you ever get a chance to sing any of his works or any of the Palestrina masses, my goodness, go for it. They are incredible works. Well, I'd like to fast forward a bit, a couple of centuries, to Johann Sebastian Bach. And in 1731, Bach wrote a Kyrie and a Gloria, and he wrote it for the newly crowned, or actually elected, but you can call it crowned, King of Saxony in Dresden. Bach was hoping for a royal appointment. He was not terribly happy with his appointment in Leipzig. He was hoping to get to Dresden, where the king was. And this became the first two movements of the Mass in B minor. Bach succeeded in some ways to get an appointment, in that he was named the official or an official court composer. By doing so, he was able to put a little crown on his monogram. But given Bach's general luck with finances in the world, he received absolutely no money for this honor, and he never got, as I say, never got paid. In the year 1749, when he is a year from his death, I'm going to just do one little thing and get rid of this deal up there. Bach decides to finish the Mass, and we are not sure at all why. He has written the Kyrie and the Gloria. Those are magnificent works, part of the B minor Mass. And he writes the Credo, Sanctus, and Agnus Dei, and he tends to write all of this from pre-existing material that he kind of recycles. The best explanation as to what was going on was the fact that there was a church, and it wasn't just any church, it was the royal church, the Hochkirche in Dresden, that was being constructed. And Bach had kind of hoped that maybe his entire Mass would be performed. Trouble is that Bach dies in 1750, and the church isn't done until 1756, and nobody remembers anything that he actually wrote this. The Mass in B minor was never performed during his life as we now see it or have it existed today. And one of the things that happened was, quote, Carl Philipp Emanuel, Bach's second son, kind of, quote, decided to help Daddy Bach with the manuscript. And by doing so, he actually ink spotted a good deal of some of the movements. And the scholarship that goes to reconstruct the B minor Mass is tremendous. Well, we come to the Credo movement, and we're going to look a little bit at some parts of the Credo movement next. The first thing you should know is that this is what's called a double whole note. We're in, it says cut time, but we're really in 4/2. So this gets 4 beats. Cre, 2, 3, 4, do, 2, in, 2, 3, etc. It moves along quite nicely with a moving bass that just kind of never stops. Credo is the Nicene Creed. I believe in one God, Father Almighty. And that's what Bach is saying here. However, as you will see, this section is a massive theological statement, but you don't see it right off the bat, because so much of Bach's music has more than one thing going on at the same time, and you have to begin to be almost like a little detective to find out the symbolisms going on. So we're in 5 parts: sopranos, 2 sopranos, alto, tenor, bass. It really moves along. So we'll go ahead and sing it, and we're going to come back in a minute and sing it again. So here we go. said that Bach basically used pre-existing material. This movement doesn't come, though, from a cantata or any other thing that he wrote. It actually comes from chant. After the sermon, when the priest is done, the priest would chant, and this is what he would chant.
Credo in unum Deum.
7 notes. Credo in unum Deum. Bach changes them. Credo in. He doesn't do the third down, he does the second. Credo in unum Deum. And he gives you 7 notes. And what is really, really cool about the opening of the Credo and the B minor Mass is that there are actually 7 parts. Now, you're going to say, Ralph, I only saw 5 vocal parts. Yes, but the first violin and the second violin also have the fugue at their own time. Now, what Bach is doing here is he is saying, this is no longer the priest chanting this, and then the whole congregation. This is for everyone. This is everyone saying, I believe in one God, rather than the priest just saying, I believe in one God. It's a very powerful statement. And every single note, every single one of these gets its own fugue or fugal subject. Amazing writing. So let's go back and sing that again, and you'll see now how that all came about. So hopefully you can figure this out. Here we go. Basis. One of the greatest masterpieces probably of Bach is the Crucifixus of the Credo. And first of all, the Credo in the B minor Mass is pretty long. It has a lot of solos, a lot of text, can go about 40 minutes. So we're not going to sing all of the Credo tonight. But I want you to look at the Crucifixus, and then I want to talk about where it actually comes from and what Bach is doing. And first of all, you see in the bass, this line, nice chromatic line going down, and then you see that it starts again. And the Crucifixus is made up of basically the same pattern in the bass, the same 4 measures, over and over and over again until the very last couple of notes. This was known as a chaconne. It was an old French dance. So Bach has taken that form and he has created a movement about the crucifixion. What's important is to note the accidentals. There's certain things that a Baroque mind or ear would immediately associate if that ear heard something. In the Resurrection, we'll hear trumpets. Trumpets always meant royalty was coming. That's who had the trumpets. So if you heard that, you knew you had royalty. In this case, chromaticism was not the norm. Chromaticism generally meant evil. Could mean the devil, but usually meant that there was evil afoot. And of course, the text is, he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. Evil was and buried. And the other factor is that you always see the descending line, always descending to the grave. And then the crucifixus itself becomes almost like the nails that are going into the cross, but it's also a form of weeping and crying. And the suspensions and the very odd tritone harmonies create that effect. A lot has been written about this movement, but as you'll see, what he actually did was he actually just recycled something he had written when he was only in his 20s. And we'll see about that in just a minute. But let's go ahead and sing the whole Crucifixus, and then we'll come back to it again. So here we go. Now he had to break the pattern here. So he could get to a G, so he could get to Et Resurrexit, which is the next movement. Before we do that, let's look at something else. Remember I told you that he incorporates in the Crucifixus weeping, crying, sighing, pain. When he wrote this, he went back to a much earlier cantata, cantata number 12. And I recycled basically a movement that he had written. And I wanted to show you this a little bit. I have to just do a quick thing to move it to 2 minutes and 26 seconds. And watch this. Weeping, crying, sorrow. And that's where we get the Crucifixus from. After the Crucifixus comes a joyous moment. Bach can be very dreary and drab, but Bach can also be really, really joyous. And so hold on to your hats. This thing is going to go like crazy. And at one point, the basses have a really great solo. We've done it with the whole choir, but you can also do it with a bass solo. But you hear the trumpets. And the trumpets, remember, signify royalty. And at one point in the text, it says, and his reign shall be forever and ever. And hence, who are they talking about? They're talking about the King of Kings. What do you do with the King of Kings? And your Bach, you put trumpets and timpani. That's typically how Bach would do it. So here we go.
Gloria,
I really love listening to Happy Bach. It's just absolutely glorious. We're going to just move ahead basically 30 years, and what the difference 30 years can make, to Mozart in 1779. And he writes a mass. It's probably for Easter. It's later called the Coronation Mass. It didn't start out being a coronation mass. It was written for Salzburg to begin with. Then he moved to Vienna. And the reason it's called Coronation Mass is because it became tradition for the Habsburg emperors to be crowned to have that mass. I mean, when you have somebody like Mozart who wrote for you, you know, why not use one of his works? I mean, for goodness sakes. So you're going to find on this example that it's mislabeled. It says Kyrie, but it's actually Sanctus. And Sanctus has three elements. It has the very beginning, Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus. And then usually there is a Benedictus in the middle. And the Benedictus generally is giving composers a chance to either write it as solos, or in this case, it's a solo quartet. But feel free to sing along with the solos and the solo quartet. And then it comes back to the Hosanna with the whole chorus. So this is the Mozart Sanctus and Benedictus from the Coronation Mass. You see it says Kyrie, but it's really... amazing transformation that occurs in really 30 years in music history between the Baroque era and the classical. I mean, what a difference in style. And from Bach to Mozart, and just really wasn't all that long of a time that things, the Age of Enlightenment and the changes came about. Well, the Agnus Dei always is in three parts. Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi, miserere nobis. Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world, have mercy on us. Then you repeat that. And then the last time, rather than miserere nobis, you have dona nobis pacem, grant us peace. Well, towards the end of the 18th century, of course, had the French Revolution. And in 1796, French troops were attacking Vienna. And Haydn writes a mass called Mass in Time of War, or its real title is Paukenmesse. Pauken in German means timpani or kettle drums. And the kettle drums feature very prominently in this. But as you'll see, there's a great plea for peace. And this ought to spark a little bit of recognition in my symphonic choir friends, since we just were doing the Missa Solemnis of Beethoven when COVID came, and the Dona Nobis Pacem of Beethoven also is a plea for peace. Also, this time in 1812 time, because Napoleon was again taking over Vienna. And Beethoven knew certainly about Haydn's Mass. These Masses were sung all the time in churches. One of Symphonic Choir's former directors, David Wilson, in his wonderful book that he's written called The Dresden Manuscripts, talks about the fact that he did his sabbatical and he spent a lot of time in Vienna, and he actually got to sing in a church that did a Haydn Mass almost every Sunday. He said it was a bit intimidating because the rehearsal was only a half hour before, and everybody knew the work, and he had to just basically get in there and learn it. But these works were done quite a bit, so Beethoven really knew this. This is a beautiful, beautiful work. It starts extremely soft, so if you can't hear it right at the beginning, don't immediately turn up everything, because by the time it hits forte and later, it gets really loud. And you will see where the timpani comes in. So this is Franz Joseph Haydn, Mass in Time of War, Agnus Dei. So I don't want to leave you just on a kind of a warlike ending. I'd like to actually leave you with something that might sound a bit cool on such a hot night. And let's just go to the delightful, there's only a couple of minutes, delightful little Agnus Dei from Charpentier's Christmas Mass. So think Christmas and snow and cold, and you're in a beautiful French cathedral and you're freezing because there's no heat. And you're hearing the Agnus Dei, which really is from an old French Christmas carol called Minuet à Revel. At midnight, there'll be a revelation. And the French like to dress up, especially during the 18th century. So what's printed on the page doesn't always reflect what the musicians actually do. They actually felt that the printed music was like putting on a plain shirt. You had to put on ruffles and everything else, and you had to ornament like crazy in order to have a really great piece. We did this piece a couple of years ago. Those of you in symphonic choir will remember. So we end with the delightful Agnus Dei, of Marc-Antoine Charpentier. And with that, I will come to an end and thank you for all watching. And if there are any questions that I have cropped up, or hopefully you could hear everything, we better stop our monks, excuse me. They need to go bye-bye. And thank you for coming. And I turn it back to Wendy or anybody else.
Well, thank you, Ralph. Yes, let's give Ralph some applause. Wonderfully done. And I know we all appreciated all the great information in this music you shared with us this evening. And I also know that we are all excited to sing some Bach or Handel or Haydn or Mozart together in person someday very soon. That'll be thrilling. Thank you also to all the visitors and alumni that joined us both here on Zoom and on YouTube. And wanted to let you know that we are days away from the end of our fiscal year. If you have the ability to give and you can help us end our year strong, please go to our website at pschoir.org and donate so we can continue bringing programming like this to you. We are here to serve you, our community, and this will enable us to further our mission. And now I get to turn it over to Alyssa.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from North Carolina. And I just want to mention that our next Summer Sings will be July 19th. It will be Dr. Carl DuPont, who is on the faculty of Peabody, and he will present a program called Joyful Joyful, a closer look at the Negro spiritual and gospel music. It's going to be really interesting. We're going to get to sing some really great material, spread the word. It's going to be educational, but it's also going to be just uplifting and super fun. And then we get to look out into the end of July and our first in-person meeting, which will be our first Vocalize and Socialize, July 26th, 7 p.m. will be at the Multnomah Art Center outside on the basketball court. You can register to attend if you go to our website at pschoir.org. And our second Vocalize and Socialize, we will have one later in August. And there are also audition dates on the website. There's so much new information. So please take a moment to just look around the website and inform yourself about what's going to be happening in the next few months to come. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Anything else, Wendy?
No. Good night, all.
Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
again, Ralph.
Bye.